Okay, so this is the Lowell Sustainability Council meeting of July 22nd, 2021. It looks like we have a quorum, so the chair can call the meeting to order whenever you're all ready.
All right, is everyone ready? Great, I'd love to start with introductions.
Don't forget to press your microphone.
I'd like to start with introductions. I'll go first. My name is Jay Mason. I'm the chair of the Sustainability Council.
You just have to, sorry. Sorry.
My name is Mary Wamboi Ekop, and this is my first time in this setting, like in this meeting. I co-chair the Energy Equity Working Group for the state of Massachusetts and represent the residents of Massachusetts in the Energy Efficiency Advisory Council. I work for the Planning Office of Urban Affairs in Boston. Thank you.
Welcome.
Hi, everyone. My name is Cormac Hondas McCarthy. I'm a Lowell Sustainability Council member, and yeah, leave it at that.
My name is Carolyn McCarthy. I've been a member for about a year now, no relation to Cormac or Michaela. And I also work for the Climate Change Initiative at UMass Lowell. I'm happy to be here in person with everybody, and Candace remotely.
Hi, everyone. My name is John Gear. I'm a council member. I'm one of the old members that Chris was referring to previously. It is good to meet in person. Welcome, everybody.
My name is Greg Steadwell. I'm a council member, and I work with the Bike and Pedestrian Mobility Subcommittee.
Hi, I'm Lynn Flint. This is my first official meeting. I've come to a few before, and I'm with 350 Mass.
Hi everyone, I'm Michaela Hondas McCarthy, and I've been a member for I think about 3 years now, and it's so nice to see everyone in person, and I mean not everyone, but it's nice to see you on a nice big screen over there, Candace, and yeah.
I'm Anna Christina Fregoso. I'm with the Boston Society of Civil Engineers, and we have a recommendation program in Vision, which is a sustainability professional program, and this is my first meeting as well.
Your turn, Candace.
Hi, I'm Candace Lawrence. I'm not there in person. I've been a member of the council for over a year. I'm not exactly sure how long. The time has sort of all blurred together at this point. I'm looking forward to being there in person next time.
I'm Brian Porter, and Jay it was a great opportunity for me to find out and hear about you. I'm actually sort of transitioning between careers right now and looking to get into sustainability and conservation, so I thought this would be a good first stop is to listen in and see what you guys talk about and what you do.
And I'm Chris Hayes, neighborhood planner in the Department of Planning and Development. I staff the Lowell Sustainability Council, which generally means announcing each of the agenda items, answering some questions, and taking minutes, and hopefully hiding from the cameras. So the next agenda item, assuming introductions are done, is the minutes for approval from June 24th, 2021. You should have 2 sets of minutes in your packet below your agenda. One of them is the Communications Subcommittee. One of them is the minutes from the last meeting. Is there any corrections or edits or discussion on the minutes?
I had a question on the minutes and a possible edit having to do with community choice aggregation. The notes say the current cost of the aggregation is only 17 cents cheaper per customer. I guess my question is that the right accurate number? I thought it was 6 cents cheaper, and that's 6 cents per kilowatt hour, which I assume is what this means, 17 cents. There's no unit in this number. Michaela, do you know?
Jay, I'm not sure, but I do have an email, that number did kind of strike me a little bit odd. So we should probably double check that.
Great. That sounds good.
I believe Catherine sent me an email with all of the data, so I can double check that.
Well, and I also wanted to change the direction of the statement. It says only 17 cents cheaper from National Grid, though it has a high renewable energy content, like 17 cents isn't good. I would change that to is 17 cents cheaper, or whatever the number is 6 cents cheaper, and has a high renewable energy content. They're two good things.
Yeah,
They're not.
I just checked it. It's 17 cents cheaper per month per customer.
Yeah, so maybe we just want to add that.
Chris, is that clear?
Yes, so it sounds like the edit is strike whatever it says, and that it instead says it is 17 cents per customer per month cheaper and has a higher renewable content.
Yeah, and just, I guess, per customer include the basic service from National Grid. Just so that it's, you know, fully there.
And I had a issue on the LSC subcommittee update on communications. I had placed a Facebook post in June. I guess it wasn't received, or it wasn't uncovered. Is that right? You don't have one from me?
Yeah, I'm not sure on that,
Yeah,
but
okay.
possibly.
Yeah. All right. No biggie.
Is that an edit or?
No.
Okay.
I make a motion that we accept the minutes as edited.
Sorry, I will second that. This is Michaela.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All abstain?
I'm going to abstain because I wasn't able, unfortunately, to attend the whole meeting in June, so I can't vouch for half the meeting minutes. So I'm going to abstain for that reason.
I see Candace is abstaining as well.
Yeah, also for the same reason.
Okay, so it sounds like all in favor, how many, wait, 5 in favor, 2 abstain. Okay, the next item then is a biggie. It is priorities and action plan for the Lowell Sustainability Council. That was an agenda item suggested by Member McCarthy, or Carolyn.
So I
Each of me.
can, there's so many McCarthys here. I'm gonna try not to lean too much into the microphone because I don't know how sensitive they are, so I'll just speak to you normally here. So I can get us started for this agenda item, and then those who are there last meeting or in the subcommittee for communications can jump in and help out. But there was a conversation that started in the subcommittee meeting about we were discussing what we should be posting. Our posts had been down, and we kind of asked the question of, well, what are we trying to say, and to whom are we trying to say it? So are we trying to reshare national or international news on climate or things that are going on in Lowell? What do we consider our role generally in this ecosystem in Lowell? And so we thought it would be a good question to bring to the council generally, to ask if the way that we're working together during the meeting still align with what we see as, you know, our vision. And there was also a question that we had, and it came up in the last meeting, I think it was the 5th agenda item, that we don't have the greatest idea of exactly what we can do. When we had the presentation from those great middle schoolers from the Daily, we they were, you know, they had a great plan. They asked us how we could help, and we were kind of, you know, we can talk to this person, and we can talk to this person. We didn't know exactly what we could do. And so the idea for this time, which I believe there's a half hour allocated towards it, would be to have an understanding of what our charge is. So what exactly can we do as the Sustainability Council? Have some time to discuss within those parameters what would we like to do, given knowing, you know, what we can actually do. How do we want to work together? And then if we want to set aside some time in subsequent meetings to get clear on, you know, either just having open discussion around the Road to 100 plan or different roadmaps versus spending most of our time in like report outs from our subcommittees. Just if we want to allocate time in the rest of our meetings to think about our mission differently, or to develop some type of strategic plan to give us a sense that we're all, sorry Candace, I'm not looking at you either. Give us a sense that we're all having a chance to contribute our expertise and be able to cross-pollinate with each other, and really have a sense of movement towards what our goals are. So that's kind of, I can frame it here, and I know, Chris, you brought a few pieces from before.
Sure. So in your actual packet, it might be toward the end, is the ordinance that creates the Lowell Sustainability Council, and that sets forth what the Sustainability Council can do, which is, a lot of the ordinance just defines what sustainability is, but really the actions that can be taken are to recommend policies and programs to the City Council and City Administration, to solicit and accept gifts and grants and donations. So you actually do have the power to accept money and go for grants if you do, under the aegis of sustainability. And finally, it specifically mentions education and outreach. It says work with UMass Lowell and other entities, but I think that can be considered broadly, that you don't have to work with UMass Lowell if you're doing an educational or outreach program. A good example of an outreach program that the Sustainability Council has done every year except for the pandemic year is the summit. So I have that. I also have in the middle of the table, I didn't want to kill trees to give everybody a copy, but I have 3 copies of each of the following things. The meeting minutes from when, about 2 years ago, the Sustainability Council had a very similar discussion. It was when I was first brought on as a staff member, so I didn't actually see much of the back end of that conversation. I just saw the result, which was a vote on priorities. So I have the minutes on the vote of priorities. And then much more recently, there was a discussion on kind of similar to that question of, or rather, groups were not reporting out, and the Sustainability Council felt like there was not progress being made on the priorities that had been decided in that previous year. And so that was when the decision was made to have a continued item for report outs from each subcommittee and or working group. Again, I wasn't giving those things for any other reason other than that people can kind of understand the history of how we got here, how the Sustainability Council got here, to kind of understand what might be working and what might not be working in terms of both prioritization and making sure those priorities are followed up on. Does that, did I say everything you needed me to, Carolyn?
Yeah, I think so. I think the idea was that the previous way, thank you, that the council was working together, is there was a lot of discussion, and then people were feeling like there wasn't enough action. And so then there was a shift to doing a lot of work in the subcommittees, and now it feels kind of like another way that there's work going on but not enough time for a discussion. So I know that a few members, we had discussed this, so I guess this is a space to like contribute if you feel that same way, if you wish there were more time to discuss, just have more open discussions, I guess, versus reporting out. And if there are particular items that you think that we should be spending more time on. And we don't have to have, I'm guessing, and then I'll stop talking. We don't have to have everything figured out today, but if we think that it is something worth spending some time in future meetings, like going through an actual process of looking at what our goals are and like how we can strategically get there, is that something that we feel collectively we want to do in future meetings? I'll stop.
Yeah, I would kind of give the feedback of I think it's a little difficult for us all to have a full-on discussion about every committee topic in one meeting because we only have an hour and a half. And especially, I think, on the Zoom calls, it was a little bit more difficult. And now that we're back in person, it might be, for the time being, it might be a little bit easier. But I do think that maybe I would recommend maybe having a rotation of every meeting we have 2 subcommittee people on the spot, in the spotlight for reporting back, and then kind of rotate. If we have 4 total subcommittees, we could do 2 and then 2 the next meeting and kind of like rotate it that way.
Yeah, I think that, and first off, the intro from Carol and Chris on this, I think is a really good starting point, especially given the idea of potential grants and funds to be raised is something that's kind of new to me, at least. As far as I didn't realize that was an option, but yeah, like Michaela was saying, I think that yeah, reducing the amount of time on each of the subcommittees in each meeting, I think would be a good first step on it. And that being said, also with having, this is also a very opportune time to have new members in the group so that it's, kind of 2 halves, one half, has been doing, some stuff for a while, and the other half has, a fresh set of eyes to, contribute to the conversation as well. So thanks for being here.
On that note, I'm wondering if you could talk about the subcommittees, what subcommittees exist already?
Sure. Yeah, so do we have everything listed out on one of these ones here? But so the subcommittees are divided out on what we consider to be priorities of the Sustainability Council. So the subcommittee that I was working on was the electric vehicles in the city. Recycling is a pretty dominant subcommittee as well that has its own team where that's working directly with the recycling program in the city, as that was a big priority for the city manager, given there's a difficulty with the whole recycling system in general in the city, cost-wise and stuff. And then one of the other subcommittees was the CCA, which is the Community Choice Aggregation, which is probably one of the most direct involvements that we've had, as far as somewhat short stint amount of work that we could kind of all collectively put in to show a decent amount of impact with regards to an increased amount of percentage of the renewable energy content for the city, as well as bike pedestrian mobility, which Greg leads on that, and then the Road to 100% that Jay leads, as well as the Lowell High School project. So we kind of take things on as they come. One of the other ones that kind of came and went a little bit was the Gas Modernization Project that we were notified about, and then we, so do you know about the project? I don't want to take too much time, but National Grid was looking to expand the natural gas pipeline in the city by way of increasing the diameter of a pipe already going through the city, which I believe it was quadrupling the capacity of the natural gas. And the original proposal was that it was going to, that the city needed it and they were planning for the future, and we saw reasons that that wasn't really the case. And so there was a whole somewhat tumultuous back and forth between, questions that we had for National Grid as they brought their information to the city, as well as somewhat working with the Conservation Commission in Lowell, as they needed to get a permit to be allowed to go through some wetlands. And so from our standpoint as the Sustainability Council, we looked at it as, we shouldn't really be expanding the amount of fossil fuel emissions, productions, availability within the city, and like spending millions of dollars to make it more robust. We should be looking to put that towards things that can reduce the amount of fossil fuel reliance. And so I'll stop there.
So if I could, that subcommittee could come back. Right now, it's kind of on hiatus. There's a pending lawsuit, and there's no activity necessarily needed from our group at this moment, other than if we wanted to continue to advocate. So subcommittees will come and go depending on the need and the impact of what the particular issue is. We had a heat island issue that we started looking at, and we're thinking about putting a subcommittee together for. So the only other subcommittee I would mention that I can think of that we have is communications. We have a dedicated subcommittee to deal with the way that we, I guess I don't need to hold it, the way that we organize ourselves and communicate, and that's a pretty important subcommittee.
And so sort of the purpose of this, reflection, we're kind of just reflecting on, where we are today and where we want to be placing our efforts. Do we want to spread ourselves kind of thin and have one person doing, kind of one of everything? Or do we want to more potentially work as like a group on, potentially larger projects that are a bit more effort?
And since you're all here, the three of you, for the first time, it would be great if you have any ideas for things that you think we should be focusing on, new subcommittees, issues that you want us to look at more. It would be great to hear from you all.
Okay. So there's something I'd like to share about. So the 3-year planning, the state's energy efficiency draft plan is out. And I mean, it's actually been out for a while. It was out in April, and members have been, members and communities all over have been providing their feedback regarding energy efficiency. I'm not so sure I had anyone from Lowell provide any feedback. And why this would be important is because the new plan is centering, has 2 pillars: electrification and equity. So as you all know, the state of Massachusetts is moving away from gas and thinking about transitioning to future without fossil fuels. And there's been a robust process even from the Attorney General's office on how this is going to happen. And I think it's important for us as a city to get involved in these discussions, because the next generation climate bill affects Lowell. And so that's something that I'm thinking that, the last 3-year plan, the city of Lowell did send the energy manager and there was a huge, Lowell contributed a lot. But right now, there's going to be emphasis in the next 3-year plan where companies like National Grid would be looking out for cities, municipalities, and community organizations to do energy efficiency in the, within the city. And statistically, Lowell is one of those places that has a lot of renters that are low income, and they have not benefited for the past 9 or 10 years from a state program which they pay into. So I think that's something that Lowell needs to really look into. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. That is a great point, and I totally agree that's something that we should be focused on. I think the last iteration, which is like a great example of why it's so nice to have new people in here. I think the last 3-year plan, Lowell weighed in on heavily because we had sort of an interest of breaking away from the Mass Save and getting our own sort of like funds that we could use as a city for our own energy efficiency plan. So there's definitely a disparity between our, as a city, our feedback from the last plan and this one. So you're right, we should kind of step up and maybe as a group do our homework and read the plan and think of ways that Lowell as a city would want to weigh in on that. That's an issue that I think about a lot, is the lack of incentives for renters to benefit from things like Mass Save, because it's usually a landlord's decision to make home improvements or weatherizations or things like that. So there's a split incentive there.
Do you know if we ended up getting the?
No.
No, you did
Okay,
not.
okay, right. I assumed that we didn't, but there was no real notification, but.
Yeah. You said the plan is in draft form, it's being reviewed for public comment right now?
It's being reviewed for public comment right now, but the time is really short.
Short. Did they give you 21 days or 30 days?
No, it's a year-long process. The vote will happen in October, the vote for the final state plan. Next week is a special EAC meeting, and in those meetings, people show up from all corners of the Commonwealth and represent their towns and their cities.
Yeah, and just for the record, when this plan was brought to us from, we sort of have a energy department in Lowell, we ended up voting, I think, against it. We were looking for more information to be able to agree on it, and that's sort of what ended up happening with it, because we weren't necessarily convinced that the general idea was that we weren't necessarily convinced that with our current capabilities that we would be able to even compete with a program like Mass Save, which we also all agreed could be much better. So that was sort of where that conversation ended up going.
Could I just take us a step back? I think one of the points is that we should look at sort of governing documents at the national level, but particularly at the state and local level, and consider those in our activities. So the state plan, the city still has a master plan that it's following. I'm not sure when that's going to be updated. But so those are resources that we should consider when determining what we want to work on. What are our priorities? How do we approach them? That type of thing. So I would suggest that that's a theme that we should pursue in future strategizing about our role and activities.
Yeah, definitely. I had a question for Chris. Something like this is, I guess, what would be necessarily our reach as a council? Would it be proposing things to the Lowell City Council, or would it be trying to work with our energy department here?
So there's definitely, you could go either way with it. I think I would recommend, working with the energy department, which is Catherine Moses, for those who are not reading between the lines. It's basically Catherine Moses, and she has one staff member under her, Jay. And anyway, working with her, kind of get a better understanding, create a strong recommendation, and then send that recommendation to either the city manager or the city council as appropriate.
I will say that, speaking to John's point, that the S9 climate bill is a huge change in, outlook. I'm on a professional work group for environmental justice and equity, and we just had a 3.5-hour meeting yesterday just on like what we're going to do going forward for the, with this new climate bill, what we're going to do with equity issues, things like Mass Save. We did talk about yesterday for a good hour about how we bring Mass Save to renters and to all, neighborhoods that normally are underserved for things like that. So we are talking about that. There's probably a lot of things in S9. If you haven't read it, it's a really interesting read that we could probably implement. Since I'm already working in it, I could probably write up a general, outline of like, these are interesting things, from S9 that we might be interested in. One of the biggest changes is that any energy projects need to be looked at in a cumulative manner, not just the one-on-one like it's been doing. So like in any individual project, it used to be that you just looked at that little pipeline and that was it. But now you have to look at that and how all these other projects are affecting people and neighborhoods and, renewable development and things like that. So it's a big change in the energy industry.
Can you tell me what S9 is?
It's the new roadmap to, what's the full name of it? The
Is it a state
climate
bill or
change
no?
bill? Yeah, it's a state bill. It was passed in March 26th because it goes into effect 90 days after that, which we've already passed. So it's the, we should look it up, but
It's probably like road to 50% by 20.
yeah,
something.
yeah. There's all kinds of, goals in there about, carbon reduction, very aggressive goals. Also.
Just what you were saying about as far as looking at a grander scale with all the various planning, because I work with the Metropolitan Planning Organization, and I know their Boston 2050 sounds very similar, the rules, where they're going. And I'm wondering how all these different planning organizations and councils, get together and see what's going on in the is there a large group? I mean, do you go to a larger, do you then go to or the city council goes to the different planning groups? Like, is there one for the northeast half of the state, or?
We are encouraged to spread ourselves out and interact with lots of these plans. But I think part of what we're talking about tonight is how do we focus our efforts and find ways to be effective with the available time that we have, because it's impossible for a volunteer commission or council to get everywhere that they'd like to be.
Mary, I think.
So I'm thinking of this from a very practical place. So the state's energy efficiency plan is going to be about $3 billion, something close to that. Secondly, the goal for greenhouse gas reductions that the Secretary of the EEA just released, about 330, that's almost half, almost actually more than half of the goal to reduce the state's GHG emissions is in the energy efficiency plan. So for any city, if you're thinking of becoming net zero or whatever it is, this is a plan you need to get into. So, we formed an energy equity council. So working group. So last year we went across Massachusetts, and so there are recommendations. Nobody really has to reinvent the wheel. If you go to the website, you will find equity or whatever kind of recommendations that went to the general council that are going to be part of what will be implemented in the draft plan. The issue is that every city needs to think about how it will find itself in this plan. And yeah.
I think that all being said, we need to I would maybe move to make one of our priorities as a council energy efficiency, since it's half of our goal to reduce emissions. And Lowell in particular is a city that has a lot of renters, and that has been a group that has been missed in my mind by the energy efficiency plan. So it's something that, we can talk to people in this city, and what are so part of it would be outreach, part of it would be kind of like strategizing on how can the energy efficiency, reading the new plan, giving our thoughts on it, and saying how, through the lens of how can we touch renters, how can we touch, even low-income homeowners, or incentivize more low-income homeownership in this city. And there's plenty of organizations that we can work with to do that. So I make a motion. Can I do that? No?
I'm not sure if I think it seems like we're still more in kind of discussion right now, since you said we could make a motion to make that a priority, but what does making it a priority mean? There's no actual definition there, so you could make a resolution, but I would almost suggest talking about it, actually writing up a resolution, and then voting on it at the next meeting.
Yeah, so one of the questions that I would have is, does anybody know how they're planning on spending the money? Whether it's through funding, whether it's through allocating funds through grants, or through like a general yearly stipend for energy efficiency in the city, and they expect the cities to start creating a budget for that.
So one of the ways residents or the people in Massachusetts participate is by getting incentives. But because of how unequal the implementation of the energy efficiency plan in the state has been over the past few years, there's what they call the municipal partnership. For example, in the last 3-year plan, the city of Lawrence worked with Eversource under this municipal partnership program. So in the next 3-year plan, the money for that program will be more than it was years ago in the last plan. So it's about maybe the city manager, someone talking to people at National Grid who on what does Lowell need to do to participate in the municipal partnership. MAPC is very active in this in the municipal partnership program. So that's what happens.
So it sounds like it would there'd be a decent chunk going to Catherine Moses's department directly.
Yes, if they meet the parameters that.
Right. I mean, we already
that are out there.
have a position that's directly aimed at that. So I would imagine that.
And other cities actually don't. So Lowell is at a good advantage.
Yeah, I think her position was previously funded by grant money originally, and then now it's, I think, funded by the city. So.
Well, and I think that's a good point in terms of going back to the overall strategy of this agenda item, which to me is clarifying our mission a little bit and understanding what can we do and looking at discussion versus action and how we get to the best mix of those two. And it seems like we need to absolutely take into account the possibilities like working with S9 and understanding better efficiency. But let's look at this holistically and make sure that we're giving enough time and space and opportunity to the council in general before focusing on a particular program. We only have a couple minutes left in the 30 minutes allocated. Do we want to give ourselves more space for next meeting to think about our direction? I mean, I thought that this agenda item was about defining agenda, and it seems like it's becoming more of a specific item to do, which is fine if that's what we want to do, but I don't want to do that at the expense of any other ongoing goal that or agenda item that we've already got. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I would just add to that. I think that part of what I'm kind of getting out of this discussion and where I think it's tying pretty well is that a lot of things have kind of changed for us in a way, right? In that there's been a lot of great stuff happening, with like the S9 bill, and so it might make sense to just allow us to, during these meetings to just kind of try to absorb what's going on around us to then try to make an attempt, as the discussion gets further on, to make an attempt to formulate where we can kind of go, whether it's through grant funds or whether it's through directly working with the energy department and the council, for instance. But I think that it's really it's great that we have that we're having this discussion now with new folks to figure how we want to move forward.
And I can give up some of my time under the community choice aggregation because I don't have much of an update. And so, Mary, there is a time constraint for us, right, to do a comment, to have some sort of involvement in the public comment period, right?
Yes, there's a time constraint, but even if there's a time constraint, what I'm raising are programmatic changes that may favor a city, which are worth pursuing in 2022 going forward.
So I would like to research the energy efficiency plan a little bit further, and I would invite anyone else that's interested to join me on doing that, and maybe holding like a separate, I know it's not a subcommittee meeting yet, but strategize on how Lowell could benefit from any sort of municipal partnership with National Grid as part of this new program.
I'd like to hear what Candace has to say about all this, because she has the advantage or the disadvantage of not being here.
Yeah, both an advantage and a disadvantage. I think I thought the conversation was going to go in a different direction. It got really granular really quick. And I'm still wrapping my head around I'm figuring out what's our role. And in some ways, it almost sounds like we're, lobbyists, like on behalf of planet Earth, not for a corporation. But, it seems like our role is to figure out, where do we think we can make the change? what's the biggest change do we think we can make? And then let's put together a kick-ass presentation that's going to persuade the council to go in that direction to actually get it adopted. I mean, maybe I don't know if I'm looking at this too myopically, but it seems like that's where we can make the most change. And then on the other side, you know, how do we sort of help the council, educating the public, I think, and trying to get public sentiment on, you know, on the side of whatever we want to propose or recommend. I think those are like sort of like the twin approaches. And I apologize for being so pragmatic, but I'm just thinking, like, what can I do? Like, where can I put my energy? I don't have a lot of free time in my life, but I want to spend it as well and as maximally as I possibly can. Those are my thoughts.
Do you mind if I add an observation? So there was definitely a discussion of the council previously about kind of a pipeline, if you will, about if a guest speaker or something comes up with something new and how that might get digested by the council and come out with a recommendation. And I wonder if that kind of philosophy or idea is good for these priorities. You've got a number of subcommittees that kind of are just kind of, you know, doing something long term and maybe losing energy because of that. Whereas it sounds like, and to Candace's point, if you can say, okay, energy efficiency is very important and we have a subcommittee on that, but it's not an ongoing subcommittee. The idea is that there would be a product, a recommendation, and a presentation involved. And maybe that involves having guest speakers on the topic. Maybe Catherine Moses comes in to answer the council's questions about our participation or lack thereof in MMP, or other people come in to answer questions about that. But then the goal is, in let's say 3 months or 4 months or whatever period it is, I forget what the pipeline suggestion was, you have a written thing that the council can vote on, present to the council, and move on. That's less about what you want to prioritize. I'm definitely leaving it up to you. But in terms of format that might work for the council, that seems good. And that could be a presentation. That could also be applying for a grant. That could also be a educational program. But whatever it is you work on it, it comes out, and then you get on to the next priority. It seems like that might be an interesting way to look at things.
Definitely.
I think that might be a good segue into our next agenda item, actually. The next agenda item,
Oh, before we move on, sorry, so what I hear is, well, John, did you have something first?
I'd like to just close the conversation if we could and come up with some action steps, to sort of summarize where we're at with this topic. Sounds like we got some research to do on various plans and activities that are going on, either in the state or nationally or within the city, that we want to learn about and perhaps implement or take action on. So maybe there's some research that we do in our own specialties. So Greg, you seem to be you would be the most knowledgeable about S9 perhaps. And Michaela, you're probably the best in terms of perhaps energy efficiency or something like that. We can utilize Catherine Moses and her role in the city. So there are other examples too, but we need to become better versed on these topics, I would think, and then apply them as appropriate to the city. The other thing that I would suggest is that we take another look at our charge, not right now, but just in time, and see if it still is accurate to what we want it to be. I mean, this was developed back in 5 years ago, so perhaps it needs to change. Perhaps it's okay. So those are some suggestions I have to try to move forward from this discussion.
Yeah, and I agree that the avenue of you know, creating goal pitches to the general city council, that it is a nice format for this group, especially since the last one that we gave, or at least one of them was with the Solarized Lowell program, which it was very constructive discussion in that I thought that the city council members actually learned a lot from the presentation. And so sort of educating the city council, I think, is a big strength of sort of what we're doing.
So what I might suggest from John's suggestion and Cormac's is, one, that we basically table this discussion, so that means the agenda item would be on, so you can continue talking about the format and how you go forward, and then also add an agenda item of energy efficiency that's a separate energy efficiency item, so that you can kind of share what you learned and decide how you might want to move forward with that agenda item. If the group accepts that by consensus and the chair concurs, I can definitely just slap that on the next agenda.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think I would add that we review, in addition to our charge, our mission, because that's slightly different. It's worded differently. It's also relatively old and needs a bit of an update if we're going to actually change the way that we do things, or, you know, evolve the way that we do things, I think is a better word. So I would support that we table the discussion, that we add that agenda item of energy efficiency, and I think we can, as I say, transition some of that thinking into the conversation about the summit when that comes up.
Awesome, thanks. Just very quickly, mission is easy to change, charge is difficult to change.
And along with that plan, do we have a shared understanding that we would do some pre-work before the next meeting to look at S9? Maybe Greg, you could give us that snappy summary or interesting points that might be of interest, and then also for the energy efficiency program as well, so that we can come into it ready to discuss. Okay.
I would add, if you could send us the link to S9, so we, that'd be great.
Has everybody looked at the city's master plan and the implications for sustainability? So I'd suggest that we take a look at that. I mean, it's an older document, but I think it's still in effect, isn't it, Chris?
Yes, you did have a question very early on when it would be updated. The city actually allocated money for a consultant to begin that process, so that would be potentially happening in the next couple of years. I don't have specifics on it yet, that's why I haven't brought it up, but once I do have specifics, I will bring those to the council.
Mary,
What is,
do you have all of the contact information on email?
Sorry, I can, Mary knows my email. I can send things on very easily. I think you were going to be asking to make sure that she could send information about the energy efficiency program.
Yeah, since you're on the
Yeah.
council, I think it would be nice to have.
I'll send you the links, but the place to get, to get the real meat of what's going on is in the MAEEAC website.
And your suggestions for how Lowell could participate too, if you want to include those, and it's something that you want to send around for us to really like dig into, I think would be great if you have any.
I just had a question. Chris, so you said that the master plan's going to be developed by a consultant? Are they going to be like temporarily hired by the city?
I don't have any specifics, that's
Okay.
why I have not mentioned it yet.
Sorry. I was just surprised by that.
Okay, so hearing no discussion on that, I'll record those action items. The next agenda item is a Lowell Sustainability Summit from the chair, Jay.
Thank you. I'd like to, what's the right word? Ask, I guess, is the easiest word. Member Candace to help with looking at the summit notes. Thank you for working with them a little bit and helping me get this in front of the council. I have included in tonight's packet it's not exactly limited to a summit. It's more of an action plan in general, but I think it can work towards helping us define our summit. It's called Step Forward, and it has a plan with goals, some how-to questions, some current examples, and then some work steps, crafting a plan, executing the planning steps, and solidifying. And I put this together because I felt like we hadn't quite arrived at a place of total comfort on the summit that we had started with COVID. And I think that summit plan is still viable and can fit into the framework that that we have laid out here. But those specifics have not been entered in, and the subcommittee needs more feedback from the group before we can take that next step. So what I'm suggesting is that we look at the framework here and decide, well, first, I guess, have comments, but decide if there are ways that we can work with these framing foundational steps to craft our summit. Candace, do you have anything to add?
Hold on, I'm sorry. I was looking at the plan itself. I didn't have anything to add. I know we were discussing this as a potential. The way I understood it, Jay, when we were talking about it during the subcommittee meeting, was that this was a potential direction that the council could go in. They could adopt a similar sort of plan, similar to, say, what Somerville's doing or what Cambridge is doing, a sort of like really all-encompassing plan that has a lot of different facets to it, a lot of different directions. It sort of seemed more almost like a mission statement to me. That's about all I'd add to it.
I guess the other question that is out there is, do we have any further development of a plan for the summit itself, just the summit?
Oh, is that for me?
Yes, sorry.
Do we have another plan? Well, we had originally the sort of the idea of the COVID theme that we'd been discussing for months and months. And I don't know that we really have an alternative idea at this point.
Do you feel that COVID idea is adequately fleshed out in our work pages in the shared drive?
I think it's a start.
We do have an agenda. We do have the ideas of goals. So I guess my question to the council is, first of all, let's take a look at the Step Forward plan and see what we think. Does it have usefulness for helping us build the summit through trying to be more like Somerville, Arlington, Cambridge? Their plans are very robust, and they also have budgets that support robust action. So we can't really compare ourselves with what's happening there. But in terms of inspiration and idea creation, ideation, I guess you call it, there's certainly models that I think we should emulate. And so I guess what I'd like to do for this time is take a look at Step Forward and get feedback from the council so that I can take that back to the subcommittee and we can work on moving the agenda of the summit together. So I'll start with goals. The goals as established.
Before you go, I think Caroline wanted to say something, sorry. Before we get too far into it.
I saw like kind of confused faces about the COVID idea. If I could just provide a little context there. So we originally had the plan to have the summit, what month was it, Jay? And it was spring of this 2021. So, and because of Earth Day and other happenings in the city, we decided that it might be best to shift it forward into the fall so that we would be able to have more participation and also have some opportunity to kind of flesh out the ideas. And so the way that the agenda stood for the spring potential was looking at how during COVID we either got closer to reaching our climate goals or farther away, and what that looked like. So we saw changes in emissions from airlines, et cetera, but generally the consensus was that we didn't see the systemic change that was while maybe emissions dropped a little bit, we didn't see the systemic change that was needed. And so while our positioning was, while we are moving towards a COVID recovery, where COVID is front and center on national dialogue, everyone's wondering how to, recover the economy, et cetera, how do we make sure that climate change and other sustainability issues are a part of that conversation and don't lose the sense of urgency that many of us still feel that it should have in this level of dialogue. So that was the framing for the agenda. And so what we would look at during that, I believe the plan for the subcommittee, we were also in those subcommittee meetings too, I think, would be to look at how we could see different examples in Lowell for moving forward that both helped with jobs or helped with our economy in Lowell, but also would move us towards different climate goals, would help with equity, would consider all of these things in different solutions. So that's kind of the context of COVID. The COVID was looking at how have we gotten closer during COVID, but also looking forward in our recovery, how do we make sure that climate change and sustainability remain a part of the conversation and don't get pushed aside because we are dealing with this crisis. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I was just going to add that during that was I think that at least I was expecting there to be more of a drastic change due to COVID with relation to climate change, but it doesn't seem like that necessarily happened, and so I'm not positive that the COVID theme would necessarily be the most interesting for the for the sustainability summit. It may make more sense to just stay on topic of sustainability in general, but that's totally up for discussion. So that was all.
I'd like to know how others feel about that.
I'd like to have a renters Lollapalooza. I'd like to know, I would like to have all sorts of sustainable information specifically for renters. Wouldn't it be awesome to have something, a whole thing, to get dedicated to something and to people who basically, I believe, are they the majority here of residents, are renters? A huge number.
It's like 55%.
Yeah, and I would love to see something that helps renters, that informs renters, that encourages landlords to change some of their behaviors. Wouldn't it be great if we became known as a city friendly to renters? That would be an awesome reputation.
I did have something I wanted to mention. In the Envision program, a part of it is when a client, or the city in this case, goes into a project, they specifically hire the operations section after the construction work is done to be of local employees, and their push towards equity as well. So you train them, and they fill in positions that need to happen after a project is completed. And that would be good for renters, because I'm assuming, are they all transitory, or?
Renters? No, I wouldn't say so.
I mean, I'm assuming the UMass Lowell students would be transitory, but like
Yes,
permanent
but I
residents,
think
there
there's-
must be a lot.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of permanent residents that are renters. Agree with the renters Lollapalooza, and I love that idea. And I would invite landlords to also be part of that discussion, because there's so many missed opportunities, I think, for landlords to take advantage of in partnership with the renters that they house.
Yeah, I would just like to second that. I really like that idea. And I think it's also, I haven't heard it before, and I think that it would be a major differentiator from places like, well, I guess maybe not Cambridge, but in like Arlington. I haven't seen what they have there, but I would imagine that it would be nice to see for a city like Lowell, and it would be generally a good exercise for all of us to delve into what's necessarily available, and for future discussions on what we think needs to kind of happen.
And I have a question for Jay. I think I might have floated this in our subcommittee meeting, but, and maybe we just need to read through it, which is what you were suggesting before I butted in, but how do you see this plan as related to the summit agenda? And also, do you see this plan as something similar to what we were discussing in the previous agenda item about how we want to be working together?
Thanks. That's a great setup for a long discussion. Thanks. That's a great setup for a long discussion. I feel that the plan, more than anything, is an effort to think about how does Lowell get to where Somerville is? How do we get to a point where we have a sustainability department with a couple of staffed folks that are working on programs to benefit renters, working on programs to develop energy efficiency in the community, not just relying on Mass Save and programs like that. How do we, develop an agency and a department and a body that supports mitigating heat island and dealing with getting solar to be more prevalent? I mean, we tried it ourselves with Solarized Lowell, but an awful lot more can be done and should be done and needs to be done. So I think the idea of a step forward plan is saying, hey, Lowell wants to join the community of these cities and municipalities that are really, that really get it. And we're on the road. We have a sustainability council. That's great. There's nothing that is going to get us more sustainability than at least starting with that, but it's a small step, and we need to really think big. And in order to think big, we've got to have some kind of plan. So I drafted this plan just thinking, well, what are our goals? Our goals are to move Lowell forward toward a more sustainable, equitable, action-oriented city. I mean, this is very similar to what it says in our charter. I'm sure we could find better ways to wordsmith both, but, we've got to build on Lowell's current progress. We've got to differentiate Lowell as a city that really gets it and demonstrates a high level of commitment to climate change progress. We've got to reduce carbon emissions, increase effectiveness of recycling programs, facilitate electrification. I mean, this is common sense to anybody who cares about sustainability, but it's not in the calculus of what we are actually doing. I mean, we're trying desperately, we're trying really hard through the current subcommittees that we have and through the programs that we're talking about tonight. But I think, like Candace said, we've got to decide how we, what did you say, Candace? Something about...
Basically, I want us to accomplish something. I want us to work on discrete goals that we know we can accomplish. We know what our role is, and we break it up into parts. We do all the research. We get a really great presentation together, and we persuade the council to go in that direction. I mean, that's what I'd love to do.
So I was asked, Carolyn, you asked, how does this plan fit into the summit? And I think it's more, the question is, I'll flip the question around. How does the summit fit into this plan? Because we really want to expand our capabilities and our effectiveness, and I think we can do that, and the summit is a great place to start. The summit is a great place to start that conversation, but it probably needs to be done in the context of a larger thought exercise. And that thought exercise, we've already decided in agenda item number 1, is to review our charge, review our mission, review the city's master plan. You know, that's the same kind of thing that Step Forward is trying to do. We do those things, and then I think the summit will organize itself in many ways. So if we have our goals and our goals continue, we can elaborate, we can edit our goals so that they're crisp and more succinct. And then, so how do we do this? Do we establish a task force like some of these other communities have put task forces together and stretched outside their own boundaries to find ways of organizing the thinking towards an action? Like Somerville put together a task force and they formed the sustainability department that they now have. Now they need, that task force is important because we're not going to get buy-in from the city, we're not going to get buy-in from the business community or the university inside these four walls. We have to find a way to outreach, and the summit's a great way to do that. As far as the current examples, I don't know if I sent the links to these three websites out. I will do so again if I have. Somerville, Cambridge, and Arlington, both terrific, all three terrific plans. I was ready to show them on Zoom, but I realized that we're going to be live, so I can't, that's one disadvantage of being live. And then crafting a plan. Gather the stakeholders together, for example, at the Lowell Sustainability Council Summit, and draft ideas, present those plan ideas, introduce feedback tables for discussion, and establish building blocks for the next steps. So that could all be done at the summit if we take that on, and we can talk about COVID and the implications of COVID on the focus for climate change. I see no problem in doing that, and then executing steps. Establish a task force and meet. That task force would have to meet and assemble a plan of components, for example, net zero buildings, reduce carbon emissions. That's more about the larger plan. That's more about getting to where these other cities are. I don't see that happening within our summit, but I think, you know, it's certainly a goal that we can talk about and gauge ourselves towards in the summit. And then finally, solidifying the plan, having a public launch at City Council, inviting the media, have special guests. There's plenty of political leaders. I see the Representative Trahan's office being a part of that. I see Representative Golden and Representative Mom and Howard, thank you. Senator Kennedy, all being crucial because, again, if Lowell wants to take the next step, if we want to jump from where we are now, which is a great group of dedicated volunteers at the Sustainability Council, to the next step where we have a bona fide department that works on this stuff and makes it real for the city, we're going to need their involvement and support. So that's what I was thinking. I'd love to have input. I feel strongly that we can get to the next step. I feel strongly that we can have a great summit, but I wanted to at least get this out of my system in terms of, well, how can we make the summit work as a tool or a stepping stone to get us to that next level of sustainable communities?
The city council members are motivated by voters. So we would need to activate residents. It's the city council who decides the budget. So it seems to me that we would need to focus on the residents who would be most affected by the climate emergency.
I do want to be careful between the boundary between a between education and outreach and the political campaign. One is good for the council. The other is good for an outside nonprofit or a group.
I think one thing that the council could do that would feed into outreach is just post online, try to make these sorts of things like the Energy Efficiency Advisory Council listening sessions, things like that, public so that people know about them, so that they attend, and things that might target residents of the city to make their voices heard, whether it's for people running for council this go around or whatever that may be, to just kind of encourage participation wherever we can.
Yeah, I mean, adding on to that, I think that I think that all of that stuff will start to fall into place with, some of these goals and projects that we, target, that we hopefully, get more of out of this, where it's, it's not just posting, interesting stuff with relation to sustainability, but, posting on, sort of big events for us on what we're doing. It's not just having a social media presence, it's having people very interested in what we're doing.
I just have a quick and gentle question. You were talking about the solarization project, because I'm not familiar with Lowell. Does Lowell, as a city, have access to the grid? Or how are they planning to get to the grid?
I think you're asking Polarize Lowell, what we
Yeah.
were saying, it's just kind of like a group in partnership with Mass Clean Energy Center, to get more residents to have solar on their home. Or we did sort of a pairing with heat pumps also to get solar and heat pumps. So it has nothing to do with sort of like our
Mass
tax.
production.
Yeah, I wish it did.
Yeah. Yeah, the general gist of it was that we applied to this program. This was like sort of a semi-grant that allowed it to be connected directly with the Mass Clean Energy Center, which sort of gives credibility as well as it being supported by the city. And we bid out, so we kind of created this volunteer program, or this program, and we bid it out to the largest installers in the area to see who would give us the best price, because it was sort of like a group buy. And so in general, people that signed on to the program were paying roughly 30% less than the typical going rate. And so it's sort of, the goal is to just kind of give a boost to the amount of solar projects in the city.
We're going to run out of time, and
We have 5 minutes to get through the rest of the agenda.
so I'm willing to table the next two items so we can try to have some closure on the summit, but I want to give time to Member McCarthy to talk about community choice aggregation.
I'll be really quick in the interest of time.
Wait, sorry, are we closing and continuing the summit item in that case?
Well, I would like to hear from I heard from the council that we should think about activating voters, and that we should, look to be more active in promoting the things that we do online, but I didn't hear anything about the summit, really, and I'm interested to know if there's some closing comments.
I see the summit as a way to move forward whatever our goals are. So I think we may want to focus a little more on what those goals are, and then the summit is part of that in terms of reaching out to the audience or whatever, or engaging people, sharing information, that type of thing, networking. So, hate to say it, but I don't think we're ready for the summit until we have a better sense of where we want to go and what our direction is. And I've heard a shift from where we were in the spring, talking about the impacts of COVID and sustainability, and now it's, I think, shifted more to something else, which I think is okay. Things change, so that's my sense of it. And I do like the step forward approach, and I'd like to sort of think about it and review it more in the context of what we discussed at the beginning of the meeting. You know, where we're going, what we want to accomplish, and how do we get there? I think these are some good items to consider. So that's sort of where I am with the summit discussion at this point.
Do you think we have enough to take back and have a subcommittee before our next council meeting?
For which topic?
For the summit subcommittee. What I'd like to know is do the three of you feel like we have a mandate from the council to move and make forward progress with summit planning?
I'm not sure that we do, personally. I think we need to nail down what we're about, take another look at that, and then the summit is a opportunity to share that with people, engage people, provide information, that type of thing. So I don't think we're quite ready for summit planning until we know sort of what our core is and what our goals are.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, in that it'd be a good idea to just kind of continue to focus on what we want to be doing going forward, and that if we ended up trying to put together a summit, that it may turn into just a bit of a distraction. So
I think it'd be probably more of a show and tell than it would be engaging people on a path that we decided we want to go. So that's my thoughts.
And one thought I had about postponing this summit, I agree. It almost feels like we're putting the cart before the horse a little bit. I would love, as a council, to be able to focus on some discrete projects, maybe some things that we can actually accomplish, some things that we can talk about at the summit. That would be incredible. I feel like if we spend a lot of time planning a summit right now, it's gonna take away that attention and what little time we have. That's my thought.
Am I possibly hearing because we had a vote to have the summit in the fall, am I possibly hearing a motion to cancel the summit until some point in the future?
Yeah, I'll entertain, and this is for discussion, this is not a motion, but I would entertain a motion that we table the idea of a summit until we have clarified our focus as a council and feel more comfortable that we have the foundation that will help us to be effective and work efficiently. So, any discussion on that?
yeah, so I guess I can motion to postpone the summit until we decide, maybe probably next year, but
I'll second that, but I'd like to clarify the motion a little bit. Could I add to
Sure.
that so that we're
Yeah.
basically putting the summit off until we've better clarified our goals and objectives as a council?
or summit planning, I guess. Right.
Well, we've put off the summit until we've better clarified our goals and objectives,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
Does that work?
Yeah, that works.
That works. All right.
I will second that.
Okay, the motion is to postpone the summit until the Lowell Sustainability Council better clarifies its goals and objectives. Any discussion, further discussion on that motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All abstain? Vote passes. The people who are not members yet don't need to abstain. But thank you. Vote passes unanimously. Assuming there's no discussion on that, the next agenda item is community choice aggregation.
Yeah, for those of you who weren't at the last meeting, Catherine Moses, the energy manager, basically said that Colonial, our current consultant on the aggregation, had the opportunity in their contract to extend for another 3 years, which we weren't really aware of at the time. So we're, I think, as a council, just going to do our best to make sure that the level of renewable energy stays the same or better, which is 45% right now. Yeah, she basically said it wasn't our role to question the contract and the legal terms. So we're taking that as that's where we are.
That's not a very satisfactory situation. We can certainly question the intent and the results of that. So I just find that troubling.
Yeah, I would just say that come time for the next renewal or contract, we may want to bring this historical issue up with the city manager prior to signing on to anything. Because none of us were able to really review the contract, right?
Right. What we can do is request that Catherine provide more detail on the sort of that clause in the contract for us to review, and request that the next iteration of this contract that will go on for another 3 years does not include a similar clause, and get feedback from her on that.
Right, the general, how it was left was that just for everybody else that was here, is that we got a good deal with the consultant, and we got what the council asked for, I guess, and that there's no reason to, be upset with the situation. Our main focus is just, we just want to get the best deal for the customers as well as the highest renewable energy content, and we feel that being stuck in a 3-year contract doesn't give us as much leverage as we can.
I would ask the council if we could request that the city, I would request that the council reiterates its interest in being part of the discussion. We asked for that the last time, and they can rebuff us, they can tell us that that's not appropriate, that's fine. But I would continue to reiterate that request because I feel strongly that we should have a say at the table when we're negotiating a community choice aggregation contract. It seems quite pertinent and appropriate for the Sustainability Council, in my view, to be part of that discussion. I don't understand why our expertise is not relied on in a situation like that. How can we not be helpful is my thinking. But yeah, I would ask that we reiterate that request and that we seek the very best deal that we can get. We asked before that they look at what was it, Pegasus was the other provider?
There's Peregrine.
Peregrine, yeah.
So there's Peregrine, there's Good Energy. I just don't understand why it wouldn't have been put out to bid as a normal contract would be put out to bid. They had this option that was in the contract that we weren't aware of. We specifically asked that the existing contract only be for 27 months, which coincided with the consultant contract, as we were told, so that we could have it be put out to bid. And we did get a good deal, so I'm not knocking Colonial for that. It just seemed like we weren't allowed an opportunity to provide any sort of contribution to this next contract, which is what we were interested in.
And just for the sake, for new people, if you could tell everybody so Michaela has a depth of expertise in this field, which is why she was so involved, and it might be helpful to just give a little bit of background as far as what you do, so that, you know, it's understood that, you know, we weren't just people reading documents and coming up with opinions.
Yeah, thanks. I'll try not to be too long-winded, because I know we're stuck for time. But my day job is to work for a nonprofit called Green Energy Consumers Alliance, which works with consultants like Colonial to provide renewable content. For part of what we do is to provide renewable energy content to aggregations like Brookline, Somerville, Arlington, Dedham, lots of other towns. So I kind of know how the bidding process works. And there's lots of other sort of providers. Paragon's a big one. Colonial's also a big one. So I do have some sort of insight into this process, which is why, and it can make a huge impact on the town's or the city's carbon footprint, and can give ratepayers, like, make renewable energy accessible to ratepayers in an equitable way, and sort of kind of, it's a great way to kind of help Lowell become a more renewable city. So that's why I think we were very interested in this process as a sustainability council, and kind of wanted to weigh in that way.
Especially for the very easy way.
Right.
To reach renters.
Right. Mm-hmm. I think the way we left it was that we wanted to make sure that we were at, part of the discussion, either this time or the next time, when they were making decisions about contracts with consultants for the aggregation.
Is that something that might be a goal for the council to bring up to the city council to vote on, or somebody to have us be much more involved in that process? Is that something that's within our reach?
I think it really depends on what you mean by involved in the process or part of the process. I mean, I would ask, kind of going back again to the ordinance, what does that fall under? So you recommended a program and specific elements of that program, the CCA, and you recommended 3 years, and you recommended a whole host of items for this program, which is totally within the charge, and I would argue a very successful action that the committee made. The question of how much you could be involved in, let's say, the negotiation or contract writing after you have made that recommendation, I feel like is a little bit more up in the air in terms of, is that overstepping the role of the council? You made your recommendation and they took it, but not perfectly, because they added a 3-month or 3-year extension clause. You can say, we recommend that the next time you do that, don't add the 3-year extension clause. You could also, as a committee, ask for a city representative to come to describe the decision-making process in that as part of a series of hearings to develop that recommendation. I don't know who you might get. It sometimes is difficult to but I don't know. I'm not gonna say that. I guess what I'm saying is, you could do that. You could try to pursue that, or you could just make the recommendation, like, make it 3 years so you have biddable things every 3 years. I don't know how much else you could be involved in that way. The other thing is I can certainly guarantee that I will make sure that they're informed, or you're informed when the contract comes up in 3 years. And if you don't have a copy of that contract, it is public information, so I could definitely get you a copy of the contract at minimum.
One thing I maybe we could suggest is having it be an agenda item for, as a, to be presented to the city council, an overview of sort of an initial plan and a final result, to which the Sustainability Council could weigh in on at a city council meeting. Just so that we're not just giving our perspective locally at the Sustainability Council to the energy director. It's to people that aren't necessarily, more layman's kind of perspective approach.
Right, so the last time it worked, the way that it worked last time was we made a recommendation to the city council for a certain percentage of renewable content and have it, go for 27 months, and then at the end of that 27 months, put it out to bid, and the council accepted that. So we could do something similar where we ask that, where we, recognize that, this contract, the way it was written, had a 3-year extension that Colonial has decided to pursue, and then have the city council make a suggestion to the city council that at the end of that contract, we have it be open to bid, so that it's clear when they write the next contract that that provision would not be part of it.
Is that a presentation that we would make to the city council, or how would we plan on pursuing that?
I think we could do that as a letter and then show up at city council to just support our letter. So maybe we could draft a letter. Does time allow us to do that in the August meeting?
Yeah, definitely. We could draft something similar to the letter we had last time, just with different circumstances, and present it to the Sustainability Council at our next meeting and vote on it.
That sounds great.
Yeah, and this is the main emphasis on this is that this is like the most bang for our buck as far as effort and what's achieved, from a sustainability perspective. We don't really have to do that much aside from research and, prodding.
And part of the letter could stipulate that we recommend the same amount of renewable content or more of Massachusetts Class 1 RECs in our next contract, because I'm not sure that that's part inherently of the next contract, and it's very important. Yeah, so it's a fixed rate. So compared to like National Grid basic service rate, it's your fixed rate for 3 years, and it includes in that rate the 45% extra above the RPS renewable energy content. So the idea is, because it's a long contract, 3 years, we get a favorable rate that's fixed instead of moving every 6 months the way the basic service rate does, while getting the renewable content. And you can, as a ratepayer, you can opt into it. So you can, as a ratepayer, if you're not on another competitive supplier, you're automatically enrolled, but you can also opt out of it. The history of it is Lowell had an aggregation before that had 0 renewable content before we adopted this 45% additional renewable content, and that rate was not as favorable versus the basic service rate as this current one is, because it was for, I believe, 6 months instead of the 3 years.
So we ended up getting the second highest rate of renewable content in the state, but when you do it per capita, it was higher than, we have more people than Newton, so we have the highest per capita rate of green energy.
If we're done with that agenda item, I'm going to move that we table the rest of the agenda based on the time of the evening.
Yeah, just so I'm clear on the motion for that it sounds like we are also tabling, or not tabling, but yeah, we are tabling, continuing this agenda item as well to the next meeting as well for further discussion. John, you make a motion to continue this agenda item and table the next two agenda items, or maybe next, three agenda items, because a new business agenda item as well. Is that your intention?
Yes.
Okay, so table all remaining agenda items until the next meeting. Is there a second for that?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All abstain? Okay, unanimously continuing this agenda item and tabling all remaining agenda items, except for adjournment, of course. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Could I just inform the council, I will not be at the next monthly meeting of, I think it's August 25th. So I'll be missing that meeting.
You get to go on vacation too? Not only are you retired, but you get to go on vacation.
That sounds good. Do I hear a motion to adjourn? Michaela motions,
Second.
John seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All abstain? Okay, meeting ends at 8:19 p.m. Thanks, everybody.